Welcome to Minds Unleashed, where we aim to empower, enlighten, and expand minds. Today, I'm here with my co-host, Wasif.
Thanks, Shiv, for the wonderful introduction, and welcome everyone.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're discussing a Japanese concept known as Ikigai. Now, I just want to touch on a bit of Japanese culture. I think Japanese culture is like insanely beautiful, very calm, very polite, very relaxed. I mean, their work ethic in corporate doesn't reflect that. They're I won't call them a bunch of psychos, but they're very hardworking. They really push themselves, which is kind of ironic because their culture's around that peace, calm. That's what I feel. It's very gentle. But Ikigai, let's talk about that. What this is a concept that you actually introduced to me. So I'd never heard of this. When I heard about it, you explained it. I was like, geez, this is very interesting. But I want to bring that to our audience as well and bring our audience along that journey. Spill the beans. Ikigai.
Yeah, sure. I think, as you said, it comes from the Japanese culture. Specifically, I think the Okinawan Japanese, who are, they have like the most fulfilled, content lives and actually they're part of a blue zone, which is basically an area, like 5 blue zones around the world where people live up to 100 years.
Wow.
On average. Like they're the highest population of people that live up to 100 years, average years. Yeah, so that's where it became popularized from the concept. So basically, Ikigai is a Japanese concept of developing purpose. It's a framework. So Iki means life and Gai means worth or value. So when you combine it, it just translates to reason for being. So how they break it into is it's like a Venn diagram of like 4 circles. Hopefully we can show it to them. And it's like the intersection of those 4 components. And the 4 components are the first one being your passion. So what you love doing, what gives you a sense of fulfillment and joy, what feels like play to you. Then the second one is your vocation. So like what skills you're good at. So the best way to think about it is like, what do people come to you for? Like, is it tech knowledge, or is it like financial advice, or whatever it is? What do people come to you for? And what knowledge and skills do you possess? Then the third one is your mission. So what does the world need and how do you fill that gap? So emphasizing your contribution to the world. And then the last one is the byproduct of all of those things, which is your reward. What can you be paid for so that you can sustain yourself? So that's what Ikigai as a framework is.
Well said. That's a really good summary of that. And I think if you look at purpose as a whole, those 4 points touch it really well. It sort of makes, if you you've got purpose, if you talk about purpose as the core concept, beyond that, if you go another layer down to understand what is actually purpose, I think those 4 things are just nail it so well that this is the 4 things you need to actually meet your Ikigai or find your Ikigai, which is purpose. That's it takes time to find out what you're good at. And I think that also touches on experiences. Not to go off topic too much, but to find what you're good at and go through the experiences, you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone, is what I've learned from my experience. You're not going to learn what you're good at, learn what you're not good at, if you don't actually put yourself through it. So for example, I've found that simply just 50% of doing is just the willingness to do it. Does that make sense? In your mindset, what I mean by that, in your mindset, if you straight away just say, I'm going to do it, you've done 50% of the work. Because your mindset and your energy you're putting towards it, you know you can do it and you're capable of doing it. Or let's say if you're not capable of doing it, you still want to do it for the sake of learning from it. So I think the mindset about just putting your mind towards doing it and that push is 50% of your work done. The other 50% is actually doing the work, which comes from proper planning, for example, having the right mindset, having the right resources, having the right people around you to guide you through it. But you won't ever find what you're good at is if you don't actually try to do something. Like if you want to learn coding, for example, you can either procrastinate and say, I'll do it. Or you can actually put yourself out of your comfort zone and say, I'm going to just learn 20 minutes of this. And if you just in your mind say, I'm going to do it, you've done 50% of the work in terms of getting to that point. Then you spend 10, 15 minutes just doing some research and you've done something to show for. That's just one example. And look, I apply that to myself for coding. I've always said, I want to learn it. I haven't put myself through it. So I have to find my deeper purpose for that. Right. But no, that's again, like it's Japanese culture. It's just so calm and gentle, but just hearing that is very fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. Like, with going on your point as well, with the purpose as well as you saying, like 50% of the work is done just through mindset and everything. But I think also you can fall into this trap of continuously procrastinating, where it's like you keep saying like, oh, I gotta learn this. You go through, they call it tutorial hell. And I know because when learning coding and tech and everything, you really can become a victim of someone who just falls into this tutorial hell, watching endless amount of courses, reading endless amount of books, watching YouTube videos, and you feel like you've done something, but I think you really only truly do it until you actually just code. Like, for example, the amount of times I've developed plans for like this design for this website, and I was like, oh, it feels like I'm doing work. But then there's so many unforeseen problems you encounter, which you don't even see until you actually do the thing. So like, I think sometimes you just have to be like, okay, I've done enough. Now I actually have to do the thing, because I haven't truly done it until I've really put myself out there to really apply the skills and knowledge. And then you get overcome with like challenges that you wouldn't have planned for and difficulties. And then that's where it sort of expands your purpose and other things as well. So I agree that part of it is like the mentality and everything, but you actually have to apply whatever you're learning and absorbing, because only then you are really learning and growing, and your purpose and everything will expand over time. Yeah.
No, well said. I 100% agree. It's a really good context in addition to that.
Actually, I did want to also mention that you had like I think an analogy of like a book that you are writing a book about your purpose.
Oh yeah. I was going to bring it up later. No, I think of life, anything you do, every single action, every single experience is on you. And you hold that pen, you write that book. Now you write that book the way you want, right? You're the storyteller of your own life. It's such a deep thing to think about, but to be given such a power where you dictate how you write that is in like, you can't actually understand the depth of that. But once you actually, if you like break it down, let's look at a book, right? A standard storybook. You've got the introduction, you've got the hero goes through some conflict, overcomes that conflict, becomes a better person at the end, right? That's not how life actually is, because conflict and bad times will always exist as you go on. It's something that will always continue. You're going to go through the ups and downs with life. And so I think of life as chapters. At each point, at whatever you do, there's different chapters. Now, your chapter could be a day old if you want. You could have 1,000 chapters. One day could be a chapter. An event could be a chapter. Significant events could be a chapter. 10 years of your life could be a chapter, however you want, right? But it's such a powerful thing that you hold the pen and you write the way you want. And the way you write is dictated by your experiences, what you go through, your perspective, self-reflecting moments. How empathetic are you towards yourself? If you're in a bad mindset, you're not empathetic, you're not self-reflecting, you're not going to write good things. If you're self-reflecting, you're empathetic to yourself, you have a bit of perspective, you're going to write great things about yourself. And you're going to write great things that you've done. Great things are not making $1 million and becoming the greatest person ever. That's not what greatness is. It's staying true to your discipline, consistency, putting in the work where you've had to, and having good values is what defines greatness. Now, whether you're a cleaner, a rail worker, a corporate giant, lawyer, doctor, whatever you are, you can be great. You can be great at any point. So the point I'm trying to make is, how do you want your future chapters to look? Do you want it to be all negative, that you are responsible for your own thing and you weren't able to do anything? Or do you want your future chapters to be full of, the good things that you could do, but also face the bad things? But another important thing is being able to go back and read those chapters and reflect from those chapters, because that's your experiences. So everything that you've done up to this point will lead up to something else in the future. And when you go back when you go forward in the future and you look back to this moment, you will say to yourself, well, that happened for a reason. This happened for a reason. This is how it happened. This is what I was capable of. And so you can't dictate a strong future without a strong past. And what I mean by that is, you have to go through the experiences. You have to go through the highs and lows of life, which dictates your past. And that's going to translate into your future. Your future then it could become more defined. You might become more wiser. You might become more intelligent. Might become more smarter. You might start making better choices. And that's the beauty of it, is that there's that entire process in that book that you are responsible for. And in that book, there's so much information that you can use to dictate that.
Wow, I'm just in awe. Like that's like such a powerful analogy, honestly. Just the way you've broken it down, it's a lot of.
I mean, if we want to make it even more simple, right? Let's look at Lego. Like, we love creating Lego blocks, creating things that are malleable, like to us, that looks like a final product, right? In a sense, you're your own Lego world. You're your own instruction manual. Only you are responsible for writing what your instruction manual is. How do you want your character to be written and developed and built? Do you want it to be? It can be anyway. There's no right or wrong. That's actually the beauty of things like this. I think we're so caught up on the fact that you've got to be a millionaire. You've got to have all these materialistic things. You've got to have all of these. You've got to have all these traits. You've got to have whatever. But it's not all of that. Like, that is success to an extent for certain people. And great if you find fulfillment in that stuff. That's good for you. But that's not what we're trying to preach, right? What I'm trying to say is, you are just responsible for what you do. It's as simple as that. I'm going to bring up a quote, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you put it really well. I think I couldn't have put it any better than that with the book analogy. And I think you're 100% accountable for your purpose and like how you want your life to, how you would want your life to be desired to be, like how you desire your life to be, basically. And I think that is the most important part of everything. It's just, as you said, writing your story. So starting with who do you want to actually become, and surrounding yourself with an environment that helps supports that as well, of who you define to be. And there's going to be days, right, where I know people say, oh, there's things that I don't have control over. There might be some situations or events that happen which are not in your control, right? And that might be like in the form of ripped pages, or like the pen leaks or something, and then it goes over on the book. And you might think of it in that moment as like, oh wow, it just ruined the book. But maybe in hindsight later down the line, you'd think, okay, that was a piece of art. That was a beautiful piece of art that I wouldn't have ever imagined or seen, because it led me to a path that I couldn't have ever planned for, which was actually better in hindsight. Like the domino idea of, sometimes dominoes fall, but then they create a path that you wouldn't have ever imagined. And you're able to now walk that path, look back in hindsight and think, wow, I think it just happened for better reasons why I just deviated.
I agree. There's this concept of the butterfly effect, right? I'm not sure if you've heard it, but
yeah, chaos theory.
Do you know how insane it is that it takes one little thing that leads to another, 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 leads to another.
You can imagine the endless amount of probabilities of what could
And
have
it's insane.
driven-
And that's what sometimes things out of your control could be, right? But in saying that, it's embracing the fact that whatever happens, happens for the better in life. Now, I'm not saying that if your mum, father, any loved one passes away, that's better than what it was. That's completely offhand of what I'm trying to say, right? The death of anyone is not, it's not the best thing to experience. You experiencing some sort of violence or being assaulted is not a good thing. But there are some parts in life where you might go through a messy breakup, or you might lose that job, or you might be impacted by something, and you're like, this is not the ideal. I feel bad. I feel really crap about how I feel. But that moment will lead to a better moment. It's just that you're not aware of it yet. I just want to say, there's a movie called Kingdom of Heaven. King Baldwin IV was a king of Jerusalem, right?
Love this.
Yeah. I think you might know the quote.
I know about it. Just go ahead.
The quote?
Yeah, just go ahead with it.
So there's a quote: a king may move a man, a father may claim a son, but that man can also move himself, and only then does that man truly begin his own game.
I love how you brought that up because, like, I was actually recently reading about him as well, and I love that quote. I really affiliate with what he said there, and his story is actually very powerful. I think you've probably read about it.
I have King of Jerusalem.
Yeah,
from age of 16, won a victory, had a disease where his skin was peeling for leprosy or something like that.
Correct.
Yeah, not the easiest thing to deal with, but
he was also 13 at the time where I think he was crowned king.
Wow.
So you can imagine a 13-year-old who's got, what was it, leprosy or something?
Yeah.
So basically his body is like, I think it was like paralyzed.
Yeah.
And his nerve functions and everything were like paralyzed. So he learned sword fighting with just one arm, and he learned how to ride a horse by using his knees. Like he was like crippled, like he's struggling, but he was able to do all that at the age of 13, whilst also leading like armies and kingdoms. And he also was able to, I think, survive against Saladin, who was a very wise, very strategic man. So he's able to like gain his respect as well. And they had like very like conflict, Christianity versus Muslim, like they had a lot of conflicts, but I think they had probably respect for each other as well. And he was able to, I think, survive until 23, unfortunately, but he did a lot during that decade-long period. And what he did was like, it's amazing how in his condition, despite his condition being the worst, he was able to still achieve and do so much for the sake of his people and protect them for a long period of time. And yeah, when I was reading that, I was like very inspired. I was like, wow, he's an example of someone who has had the worst conditions, like being born in that state, but yet was able to achieve so much more than like what his environment was. He's able to surpass.
I mean, this quote is from a movie, so I don't know if he said it, but the fact that and only then does that man truly begin his own game. So you can have a lot of people pull the strings around you, but you are responsible for your own thing at the end of the day. You're responsible for that, right? Holding that pen and writing it the way you want. No one's going to hold that pen for you.
That's
very powerful.
Couldn't have said any better. Yeah.
I agree. And I think from experience, people love the idea of someone coming and rescuing them. And look, sometimes you meet luck and opportunities where you meet people that give you good opportunities, but that comes from preparation, good work ethic, and an element of luck. You've had to put yourself in that position for that person to notice you first. So yes, you might get rescued by someone, but you have to put yourself in that position first. It's not random. Element of luck, not purely luck.
I think there was a quote as well that is something like, luck is when
preparation meets opportunity.
Preparation meets opportunity. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think going back to what you were saying was like, you have to put yourself in the position. It's like when you watch like soccer players and stuff, they didn't just like a lot of the time they to score a goal, they had to be there in the first place and they had to position themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to score goals.
Exactly.
And yeah, well, you're going to emphasize on something?
No, I think that there's another quote in that movie. The whole world is in chess. Any move can be the death of you. do anything except remain where you started, and you can't be sure of your end.
Wow.
So you got to continue. Like, for the way I interpret that, goes back to the idea of like experiences in the book that you're responsible for. You have to keep moving forward. You can't stay where you are, because that's complacency and that's laziness and that's comfort. I think if you ask any leader, CEO, directors, managers, doctors, whoever it is, I think anyone, not just leaders, if you just ask them, if you remain where you are and you are comfortable, would you be happy and content? And I'm pretty sure 90% of people will say no. I want to keep progressing. I mean, that's why people progress in different parts in their life, right? Whether it's whatever career path you go down, there's that progression path that you always look towards. And so you're always on the move. You're not always stationary. You can't be stationary. It's not how we're built. Humans are not built to be stationary individuals. We're always on the hunt. We're always looking for survival. It's our evolution mind. It's an evolutionary thing.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have progressed to where we are right at this stage. If we just decided, hey, let's just stay at the Stone Age and let's not like think about how we can improve ourselves.
100%.
We would have been thousands of years behind.
We'd be doing a podcast with a rock, speaking some gibberish language.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think that element of always progressing and that's what we said earlier as well, like enjoying the journey of progression and development. Because people will be like, oh, but how do you find fulfillment and contentment? Well, you find fulfillment and contentment in the journey and in the process rather than the outcome. And it's like a game. Like you're always improving, you're always progressing. And that way you're not going to actually ever be in the state of stagnancy, which I think is modern day hell. I think they call it falling in a rut. Like your stagnancy, I think, is the worst.
Yeah.
Because there is no development, there's no progression. You all you're doing is just existing. You're not living in that state. So
you're essentially a vegetable at that point. And not to be disrespectful to anyone has been in that state before, but you're not. You've become a blank slate at that point, which isn't the right way to progress in any point in life. And that's just a general thing across everything. It's not specific to men. It's not specific to leaders, entrepreneurs. It's every single person. I mean, a child. If you look at the analogy of a child, like how much does that child progress and develop over a 6-year period? It's already ingrained as the moment we're born, using our first words, taking our first steps, writing our first word, learning how to ride a bike, learning the alphabets, counting 1, 2, 3, then progressing. Everything is progression in life. It's fascinating. Going back to Ikigai. So there's passion. So P, vocation, skills you're good at, which we touched on. Mission, what the world needs. Is that more so just identifying? I think that goes back what people come to you for. Is that what it is? Sorry, could you mind just emphasizing that a bit more?
Like vocation is, I think that's a very good that you brought that up, because it's good to make that distinction. I think if I was to make it more clear, I think actually your vocation would be like, what knowledge and skills do you possess?
Right.
And your mission is like, what problems do people come to you for? What problems specifically do you get mentions in the most? Like people refer you to the most. If it's like tech, then maybe that's where your area of expertise is, and you should probably do something about that when you identify a gap. I think that's how I define like your mission, and it also, like with the mission, it's something that can't be numerically defined. Like I can't say, like it's a mission statement. Like when you read mission statements, there's no such thing as we will have to reach a KPI of like 100,000 people to influence them or something like that. Or like we want to influence 100,000 people. It's more of like, it's more global impact. It's general. Like the mission statements, I can't really think of any right now.
That's okay.
But it's like, instead of saying we want to influence 100,000 people, we want to influence the world and be able to help people's lives. See how there's no metric involved in that. It's not numbers. It's about, in that way you can never really like finish that mission, it's always an ongoing thing that you always will strive towards.
So there's no
progressing.
ceiling to it.
There's no ceiling towards
Yeah,
it.
it's
It's like
endless.
a legacy almost.
It's
yeah.
endless. Yeah,
It keeps going and
Interesting.
going. Like that's just like with companies. There's even though they're hundreds of years old, they might have rebranded and stuff. They're still living to this day and age, and the mission is still the same.
Yeah,
And it's not. There's no end goal. It's always progressing, developing.
I will say, it's such a beautiful concept. Like certain people have perfected it, but I think we live in a superficial world where if you're not this, you're not considered serious enough or successful enough.
What do you mean by this?
Like, so for example, let's look at Japan, right? Like Ikigai. You've got someone, like I think you've used the analogy, a sashimi chef going through all years of training to be able to cut the perfect piece of sashimi repetitively, right? We've got people in this world now that don't actually value that. They wouldn't value that. They just see it as, oh, he's just cutting fish, big deal. I do more serious work. You know what I mean? That's the superficial world we're sort of living in right now. And so I don't see, and I'm not saying this is everyone, but people tend to start judging instead of understanding that that's their fulfillment. If someone's fulfilled and happy with what they do, leave them alone. Don't be the judge of that. If you're not fulfilled and happy with that, you're not doing it. You don't have to do it. But if someone is, let them be. I think that's the biggest, I just want to call that out, that this idea that we have to be quick to judge because it doesn't compare to our ideals has to be removed. And I think if everyone removed that from their lives, we'd actually be a lot better. But unfortunately, human nature isn't like that. Like, do you agree?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. You're saying like where people push their desires and what they think
On others.
onto others, and they judge based off what they own as
Yeah.
well. Especially like, oh, they don't have like, oh, they have a Toyota.
Yeah,
This guy must be very poor.
exactly.
He must be living a
That
miserable
judging.
life.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's just like it's not that at all, you know. So it's like everyone,
Leave him alone.
yeah. There's no. It's just projection in a way, because it's like if you have that much time to spend analyzing someone, why don't you spend that time just analyzing yourself? You'd be at a much better place, or you'd even come from the, like, even if you do have that mentality, it's just like, okay, how can I help this? How can I bring the best out of this person? It's like coming out of the state of abundance. How
Yeah.
can I influence or positively influence this person if he desires to improve in this, or like the sashimi guy, whatever, tuna guy cutting it. It's like instead of saying, oh, like he must be like a poor whatever person, like thinking very negatively of him, it's just like being inspired by how precise he's able to cut it. It's like, oh, maybe he can probably go to like higher places. How can I help position him there? Or what can I learn from this person? How is he able to cut
Exactly.
so precisely?
It's a
What is
mindset
his
shift.
journey in his, what led him to this route? Because it's a very, like, what gives him this fulfillment of doing it? And you can learn so much from just that interaction.
And it's curiosity. If you lack curiosity, you lack deep level of thinking. When you lack deeper level of thinking, your first line of thinking is judgment. There's two lines of thinking that I see in life. You're either judgy or you're curious. If you're judgment, you're one dimensional, I don't want to hear from you. Genuinely. If you're going to judge, stay away. There's no need for you to be here. There's no need for me to even value your opinion. You judge. I'll be curious. Curiosity, though, regardless of what it is, just curiosity, I think, is such a deeper level. It's such a simple word, but it transcends you to a deeper level of starting to think of, why is it this way? What, like those questions to a sashimi chef, right?
I mean, it's what gives you an edge as well when you think
Exactly.
about it. Like, we have speaking like biologically, we have like a neocortex, which gives us the ability to actually be curious and think, which animals don't really have that, like advanced level of like being curious, of asking questions.
Some
things
animals
like
do.
Some,
Don't ask
some
questions.
animals, not like most don't, I think, but some animals do, yeah.
I think majority of animals are curious. They just can't.
They are, but it's like they
question
can't
it.
reason.
Right.
They
Yeah.
can't rationally reason
Okay,
like we
cool,
can,
cool.
basically, to
Yeah.
that extent, because they just don't have the neocortex.
But let's be honest, there's human beings that can't even do that.
or
If
just,
their first line of thing is judgment, they're not curious.
or they just don't do it enough.
They just maybe don't have the ability. They just don't. They just don't.
It could be that too. It could be also because like
They just
we
don't
have
know how.
algorithms that do
Yeah.
things for us. So it's like we don't have to really think as much. The algorithm dictates a lot of what we do, like the decisions for us.
Mm.
So it's a lot of reasons, I think, but I'm just trying to make that distinction of how we're able to rationally reason and think, and that gives us the edge. That gives you the edge against AI and against other creatures.
Yep. Okay.
And yeah, I mean, animals probably can, but even the ones that are curious are actually the most intellectual. Like they are like dolphins and stuff. They're able to communicate and do so much more than what most can.
Let's wrap up here. So let's summarize Ikigai. PVMR. I'm not going to read the screen. Passion, mission, vocation, reward.
Correct.
Perfectly said. Any final words before we...
No, I think you've summarized it pretty well. The book analogy is quite a lot to take in. I think
Yeah, it is.
I think that's
Just
something
think about
worth
it.
looking back at, watching again and just absorbing that. I think is really well said. And I think as long as you have that sort of framework around the Ikigai and you put yourself in situations which might be uncomfortable, but are consistent of learning and absorbing and prioritizing on just the journey than the destination, that will allow you to develop a more depth to like purpose, basically. Yeah.
Well said. I will wrap up here. Thanks for joining today. Thank you to our audience for listening and watching. Like and subscribe our video. Subscribe our YouTube. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. Follow us on the streaming services that you're listening on, and we look forward to bringing you some great content.
Thanks, Shiv. Thanks everyone for joining, and see you guys on the next one.